Vitality right now may be playing the best brand of Counter-Strike they may have ever played. That tournament in Cluj was clinical. That final performance was clinical.
There's other teams out there who can overtake them.
No, I'm actually going to disagree with you on this one. Here's why. Right, we're back for counterpoints. Obviously, we are fresh. It is at the end of the week afterwards. Off PGL Cluj and Poker. Now, here's the thing, Pimp. It's funny because this just shows you how crazy perspective is in esports. Because, mate, fans have the shortest memory of all time. Does no one remember what the second season was like last year? Where actually the fan take was like, Vitality's toast. They're never going to win again. They've like fallen off and all that jazz, In fact, the joke was back then people thought Fury was going to be the new #1 team. Maybe Falcons going to overtake them. But what's funny is, because they've started winning every tournament against Vitality, people have done that thing where, this is what I mean about having a short memory, Pimp. Now, even though it was an edgy take for me when they won their first event, the Krakow event, like, they might just win everything. Now everyone thinks that. Now every fan's just like, yeah, it's easy, isn't it? Just walk to the final and then win it. It's like, you guys weren't saying that at the beginning of the year. And also, that, if anything, that's a testament to how insane Vitality is, that people are doing that thing where they almost in their mind, like, give them championships they haven't even played a match in yet. Because I always think, Pimp, that it's actually almost underestimated how insane it is to just win tournaments back to back to back like this, and to be such a massive favour. Where like as of right now, because none of the other like big dogs, like there's been no Spirit, Falcons, Fury was barely relevant in the last one. It actually does feel like at the moment, like you can almost just be boring. Like Vitality should basically win, like, I don't know, like all the rest of the events or lose one event or something. It's actually why it's so outrageous that the Atlanta field so much. So where are you at on that one? Because this event, it did look, I mean, pretty sweet. They didn't lose a map in the entire fucking playoff run, Pimp. Like, is Vitality just unbeatable? In a month from now, will we see a team challenge them and then we'll realise it's more reasonable? Where are you at on Vitality?
It's a good question, because I do think Vitality right now may be playing the best brand of Counter-Strike they may have ever played. That tournament in Cluj was clinical. That final performance was clinical, and every single game they played was just clinical. You add up that with Krakow, the way they won that, the way Saivu was playing, the fact that you have now your individuals, or your biggest individual star, apparently hitting his peak all of a sudden in the beginning of the season. I think it's easy to build the case right now that you would label them unbeatable. I do firmly believe, though, that we did see, second portion of 2025, that it doesn't take a lot, for Vitality to be human again. And it's definitely a team that is beatable, but it requires the other teams to step it up a notch. And I think that's the biggest worry I have. I have no doubt that Vitality, they're going to continue to play quality Counter-Strike. We saw that last 6 months of 25, the second they started playing just at 80 or 90%, they became beatable, but they still won a couple of trophies. They still went into semifinals and finals consistently. It requires other teams to step it up if someone wants to beat them. So I have very much faith in Vitality continuing to play well, and I'm super curious. This new quote unquote new storyline for me to follow for Vitality is that are we looking at a team that is now getting better? Like was 2025 Vitality not the best version of Vitality? Is there a world where 2026 is even better? I think the last two tournaments is pointing in that direction. Of course, to do that consistently as long as they did for 25 is going to be tough, but the way it looks right now, the way they're playing, the way Saivu is all of a sudden becoming like, again, I mean, you can now make the case that he's at least more informed than donk or any other superstar in the game right now, So I think there's a lot of interesting storylines building around Vitality that is more than them just being the best team in the world. But again, I think I tweeted it and I made an Instagram post as well. I have no problem now saying with certainty, I think Vitality is the best team to ever play Counter-Strike. Like, we had this conversation with Astralis back and forth, I still think there's a debate obviously to be had, and I still think it's a close race, but for me with Krakow and with the way they won in Cluj and Poker and the fact that streak, that era have now extended to 14, 15 months and seemingly that's not going to end anytime soon, I have no problem saying that if I were to choose now, gun to my head, I'd say Vitality is the best team ever to be assembled, and that's where it gets interesting for me, because then how much are you gonna, like, how big of a leap are you gonna take on Astralis, and how much are you gonna cement that, to a point where we obviously said it after Astralis, no one is ever going to be as good as this team ever again, but now Vitality is here. Like how much longer can they do that, and how high can they set that bar for potentially no team ever to come close to that era ever again? And to me, that's super interesting, because as you said, there's no doubt they're the best team in the world right now, and the only way someone beats them is if Falcons or Spirit or Mouse or Fury, for that matter as well, they step up, because right now the gap is just getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, actually, a funny thing, I've got an angle on that. Like, first of all, one thing I think is mad underrated about this Vitality is, as you said, because last year they had that crazy 37 series streak, which basically ended almost immediately after the first season, but it was almost the entire first season. They just never lost a BO3, BO5, except that first one against Eternal Fire, now Aurora. Because that record will probably never be matched by anyone ever in Counter-Strike again, mate. Like this Vitality's not going to do it. They'll lose one eventually. Like, that was an inhuman record. I think that actually is what will stop people thinking this one now in the first season of this year could be the best Vitality. Because I'm with you, Pimp. I actually think they've like added a little bit more like nuance and like complexity to their game. Even like I saw this video Steeko did the other day, which is a fucking banger, mate, because he does a video about how unfair this like stretch of rounds. I think it's actually from the Crucial Poker final against Paravision on overpasses from Vitality. And what's funny is you think when you boot it up, it's just going to be a bunch of like insane kills or, you know, they rush on the site and you can't defend them. You think of like some of those rounds back in the day. Mate, essentially what he shows in this video is like how absurd the utility game of Vitality is. Like basically on overpass, Belchanok from Paravision, when he's playing B around like the monster tunnel, mate, there's like about 4 or 5 rounds where he's just taking grenade damage every round, no matter where he stands, before he ever meets someone. So it's why I was actually saying on one of my other shows when people were bigging up how insane Flames is this year, I was like, it's true, but also, holy fuck, does he have an amazing team to be an entry on. Like, you think of some of the entries back in the day where it was just like, remember it's actually a real thing that in the French scene, the nickname for Apex in his role was the meat, as though it's like a bit of meat you throw out there so all the dogs attack and then you kill them for, like, in this world, mate, he's on some dream world where he runs in and they're already getting grenade damage, someone's behind them, there's a flash, there's a fucking smoke over. Like, that's the thing I think so underrated about Vitality is, if you've ever seen fans do the whole Donk versus Emu thing, mate, you would come away from those comments thinking that Donk is the one who plays on the team with the best utility and the best IGL and the best coach, and you would actually believe for real, bro, that like Vitality is the original like phase super team with Carrigan and Nico, where it's like, you know, one flash and then just everyone's who got him and runs on the site and there's like fuck all tactics. Like, I think actually people don't play up enough like the utility, the tactics, the fucking control Vitality has. Like, I'm with you. They also, by the way, this is why this version might even be better. Zero looks better now than he even did last season. He actually looks like he might be his best ever form. So I'm with you, mate. The other problem as well is, right, even if people want to do that thing of like, yeah, but they've never played a team like Astralis. Yeah, Astralis never played a team like this, mate. That's why it would be so fascinating to do the shadow box. What would these two teams be like? Because, like, remember, the teams that they were beating were certainly very good teams, but I don't know that they were historic like this. It's actually why the one thing that could change this year, which I actually think would make everyone agree this team is better than Astralis, is if any of the other teams get really good, but it's not their fault they lose to Vitality. Like, let's say Spirits roster moves eventually work, or Falcons get over the hump and they can win like every other tournament that Vitality does. I think in a way that would help Vitality actually, mate, because the one thing haters push on now is they try to make it sound like all the other teams are bad, and it's like, yeah, but they're also bad because no one can beat Vitality. That makes you look bad, right?
Yeah, true. And you know, to that argument specifically, I feel like the same was being said with Astralis. You know, that Liquid was the only good team in their era. And to be fair, I think right now, you know, if I were to be completely honest, I think the top 2 to top 6 to top 8 is way stronger now than it was back in the Astralis days. You know, I remember Navi back in the day. Yeah, they had Temple, but Navi as a team wasn't really that impressive. Liquid consistently got into every single final against Astralis. The reason why Liquid consistently got into every single final is that number 3, 4, 5, and 6 wasn't really that impressive. Whereas it's different teams that Vitality are facing every single time now. Like it's your Paravision, then it's your Spirit, then it's your Falcons, then it's your Mouse. Like they get different opponents because there is a little bit more of a ground level to number 3, 4, and 5. So I think that argument, at least, I'd be willing to almost dismiss it from the get-go. But yeah, you know, I welcome people debating that, but I really agree and want to hone in on the point you made that just purely from an eye test, like the way they conduct themselves in the game, the way they control the game, the way they won that final versus Paravision, it's like when you're a player on a server and you're facing a team like that, like you just die inside. You feel like no matter what you do, no matter what tactic you play, no matter what round opening you do, like they just got you read like a book, as you said, like with the grenades, with the utility. And then the most underrated point is that Flamesy is off to his like best start ever in his career in 2026. And I agree with you. A lot of that is obviously him being set up by the way Vitality is playing, but that was also the case in 25. It's not like Vitality have changed drastically or dramatically. It's not like they've put focus on, now we want to make Flame C the most integral part of our lineup. Sure, certain things have been done in order to make life easier for him, and he's just, harvesting the fruits and playing significantly better than he did in 2025. And I'd even argue that Robs is off to a bit of a overall, a bit of a slow start here in 26. He's been dealing with some sickness. Came after it in inclusion poker and obviously stepped up in the playoff when he was feeling well again. But how many teams can allow themselves to have your second best player not feeling well, being sick, having a slow start to a year, and you still fucking dominate? Like, you dominate the circuit. And that's the worrying thing with Vitality. I even think there's a world where, it goes without saying, Spirit with no donk, are they even a top 5 team? Right? We have had that conversation for a long time. Vitality without Saivu, can they still win tournament? Vitality having Saivu posting a 1 rating at a tournament, can they still win it? I think so. I don't think they necessarily rely on it. Yeah, yes. That's the crazy part. Like, you have maybe the most informed player in the world right now, but you don't necessarily need him to win. It's just a luxury to have him, and it makes you dominant when you do it. So I think that's the most telling part for me, that I think the win can come from all different directions if you're Vitality. It can come from Saivu, it can come from Robs, it can come from Flame C, it can come from the team play. Even when they're not looking great per se, they always find a way to come back into the game. And they're sort of like building this, I guess, fear into the other teams as well, where when you draw Vitality in a bracket, or when you're going up against them in a group set, like you almost know from the get-go that we lost this game, guys. Let's just try to do our best, and that's never going to help anyone beat them. So Astralis had the same thing going for them. Subnix had the same thing going for him when he was in a clutch back in the days. Maybe slightly overrated in how he approached the clutch from a technical point of view, but just the installed fear in the opponents that Astralis, Subnix, and Vitality are doing to the opponents right now is also helping them whenever there's a close game. So I feel like I can come up with 5 or 6 or 7 different avenues where Vitality can win a tournament. Whereas if you want Spirit to win a tournament, you want Furia to win a tournament, you want Falcons to fucking not bomb out in a quarterfinal and look like a bunch of noobs, then everything has to click, everything has to go in the right direction. And for Vitality, they're kind of immune to that. They can do it in so many different ways right now, which again, to me, is another great case of why I think they're the greatest team to ever play Counter-Strike.
Yeah, what's funny is I can already predict, and it's to say it's not my first rodeo, mate. I've just seen so many internet comments.
You've been here for some time, yeah.
I can just imagine what they'll say. So I'll already predict. People will take that as like a Zebu hater comment. Like, I think they could win without it. No, here's the point. We're not saying it would look like this. The point, put it this way, think of Paravision, who've now been in 2 massive finals. Bro, if you ever go look at the stats are humdrum across the fucking board. They've got the joke is, no Paravision player would even be a top 2 player on Vitality right now. That's why Vitality doesn't just win, bro. They're just like miles ahead of everyone. And if you like, this final's a great example. Oh, there was just a couple of maps where Paravision had a chance, but you just don't get to win the map. Like in a normal game, there should be like a 3-2 or 3-1. It should be really great. It isn't though, because they're just too much in every field. Because I'm with you. If you took Zebu away, look, we're not saying every tournament they could win, but could they win one tournament the rest of the season? I think they could. Because as we're saying here, as long as the others could play similar to their level, it'd have to be close, but they could get it over the line. They could actually do it. I believe it. Or if we just be, let's not even make it that extreme. Let's just make it that you take, we won't say you can have Monacy or some other Superman, but you know what? People love to bring up the Molodoys of the world. If you put someone like that in Zero's spot for one tournament and it was, some scenario where like you all die if you don't win, they could win one tournament. Yeah. They could, come on.
100%. I said, fuck it. This is gonna be controversial. I think you can go way, way down in the pecking order. I think Brokey could win tournaments with
that wrong show. That's not 10-point rate. That one. Listen, I have to draft you in for one. That's pretty good one.
But in all honesty, I think that's the case. Because I agree. The comments below are probably gonna be, you're still a Saivu hater. You still think Donk is better, but. In all honesty, I think Saivu is the best player, or the most informed player.
By the way, right now, he is the best player. Like, if he actually played like this last year, I wouldn't have a problem with him being number one. He is the best player right now. He's better than Donk. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It doesn't change what I feel about 25, but it sure is going to change what I feel about 26 and who's the most informed player right now. But that's my whole point, as you just described it. Even though you have the most informed player in the world, even though you have a Saivu who's maybe hitting the peak of his career, by now, which we thought he already had been through, then I think Vitality is still such a great unit, still such a great team. They have so many win conditions. Again, we don't have to mention Messi at all. Like his name is always, you don't have to. You can do it if you want to, and you can give him his flowers. And obviously, he's great as his role and great as his job. But there's just so many other players to highlight at the moment that even a guy like him goes missing. So I think it's not impossible to imagine a world where Saivu is maybe sitting over a tournament or two tournaments. He even spoke about it in 2025 that he felt he was close to a burnout, in the future. I'm not saying that's going to happen now, but maybe in 27, 28, 29, who knows, when he's entering later stages of his career. I still think there's a world where, as Vitality are playing right now, the way they conduct themselves, the way Apex is calling, I still also think that it's a team that can win, tournaments without Saivu. And I think part of that as well, and part of what makes me comfortable saying that is that I don't think the other teams right now are playing up to par. If Furia were playing the late 25 level they showed, then no, I think that'll be too big of a hurdle to beat a Furia without Saivu. If Falcons played, like they did in the beginning of 25, before they started to practice with Monacy, and how they did in Melbourne and that string of tournaments they had there with Dexter even winning the PGL event, I think that would be tough as well. I think Peak Mouse is a team they probably wouldn't beat either without Saivu. The issue is that none of those teams are playing as good as they did in their best periods in 25. So I think it's a bit of a comfortable position to be in for Vitality, but that goes back to the point that I was saying to begin with. If anyone wants to beat them, and if we want to see, quote unquote fun tournaments where there's still, a bit of a jeopardy, who's going to win it? Do we think it's going to be Vitality? Could it be someone else? Then the other teams will have to step it up, because Vitality are seemingly not going to slow down. So if you want different teams to win big trophies, then it's up to them to close the gap, not Vitality to fall to that level.
The funny thing is as well, the reason I'm actually this is where people will always be confused by my position, because people who think I'm a ZywOo hater should think I would hate on the team, because I obviously I'd need the team to fail so you wouldn't get the results, right? But what people might not get is this, even though they took this as a hate angle, in 2024, when this team was the same but with Spinks instead of Rops, my take at the end of that year was like, this might actually be one of the worst underperformances ever from a roster, because remember, all they won was one trophy. They won that Cologne one in that epic final against Navi. And then aside from that, they win like a million semis again. They were almost like a mouse of that year, where every time they felt like they walked to the semis, but they just never got it over the line. And what's funny is people back then used to think I was like overvaluing Spinks or something. And what I meant was, but this roster, you could just see how it was like that far from actually being like really good. And then obviously they just figured it out when they put in the Rops move and whatever else they did. Maybe Extaz did something in the meantime. But I do think people underestimate that. In fact, that's actually maybe the problem with the fact that ZywOo is looking like he's going to be Player of the Year again. It'll make people think he's like the Giga carry. It's like, look, his numbers are insane. But in the same way as no one would have said simple Giga carried like 2021 Navi, because the whole team had bad firepower, I think we have to acknowledge that the team itself is insane too. I'm with you, mate. Especially because I also do think people go too far with, like I said earlier, people make it sound like this is like, when Team Liquid had the Grand Slam win and they really did just shoot everyone in the head. Like all three of their players, I think, were like a 1.15 or above rating. And every game it felt like they just bought AKs and just killed everyone and no one could do anything against them, right? That's not what Vitality's doing. Like, Vitality's got weird, as I was saying, they can even match up with the Strands to some of those other like metrics beyond just like good players. So I'm with you. And then also, I know what you mean. Like, I even think some of Vitality's current dominance, though, maybe even comes down to some factors to do with how the other teams see them. Because I do think when Astralis was on top back in the day, one of the reasons their era was way longer than other people's is because by the end, mate, those top teams were just beaten down. You know what I mean? It's like you just went in the match. Yeah. In fact, you see it now, mate. Now, the new accomplishment for a team isn't beat Vitality. It's make the final and then lose to them. That's like now the cool thing. If you go look at any of these teams, FaZe at the major, you look at fucking Fury in the last tournament, now at this one, Paris, we're giving them a fucking round of applause just for making the final, mate, because even they know they're not winning the final. You see it in these close maps in the final now. Like in Season 2, teams would have won those maps and did win those maps against Vitality. No one believes they can get it over the fucking line, mate. That's also why the ZywOo angle's so OP, because you're losing anyway to Vitality, and then if he ever does like a 4K, it's just over. You just lost, you've 100% lost the round. And I have to say, much like FaZe at the major, if I'm a lot of these teams, bro, even though fans are coping by going, yeah, but look how close this map was, look how close this map was. If I'm leaving these finals, I'm not doing that thing of like, oh, god damn it, we're going to get them next time. That was bullshit. I'd be like, you know what, fair play if they're going to do that. Like, what do you want us to? I'm not fucking superhuman. All I can do is play the game. Like, there's a saying in basketball, Pimp, that when people hit a really hard shot that you defend perfectly, you just do in English what you call tip your hat. You just go like, well done, you win. Yep. You win. Sometimes you just have to give it up, right?
Yeah, you do, and that's, I think that was exemplified the best in PTL. Obviously against Paravision as well, that grand final. part of me, and that's again, I guess we can dive into that conversation. Part of me almost wanted Furia to beat Paravision, to have the Furia versus Vitality in the grand final, just to see if Vitality couldn't make Furia look like a team that was nowhere near them. You know, that's kind of what I wanted to see. Because I think the way they beat Paravision, they beat a good playing Paravision. Like Paravision deserved to be in that grand final. They played a great tournament,
Absolutely.
but it's always easy for fans and even myself to have that little, inkling feeling that, had it been Furia, maybe it would have been a different game. Maybe it would have been more competitive. Maybe Molodoi would have done something to at least win a map or whatnot,
Yes.
But I feel they probably wouldn't have changed much, but I would have loved to see Vitality 3-0 Furia, dominate them from start to finish, basically do the same thing they did to Paravision, just to get confirmation that that's the level that right now. That's how big of the gap is right now, because essentially we can now, theory and be like, yeah, okay, Furia had a rough game against Paravision, couldn't beat them, but sure, they would have made the final more competitive. I'm not sure they would. I think that they would have a higher likelihood of winning a map. They would have a higher likelihood of making the game competitive. I think they're still a better team than Paravision, despite losing to them in the semifinal. But I'll be completely honest, I'm not convinced that Furia would have made that final closer. I think that's how good Vitality played, and that's how good they are right now, that I just would have loved to get the confirmation that the gap between the best team in the world and what many people have as the second best team in the world right now is that big. And that's the only thing I feel like was a little bit of a shame for Cluj. Outside of that, it was a great tournament. We had everyone there, apart from Spirit and I guess Liquid, but nobody really misses Liquid at the moment. So I think it was one of those tournaments that we got a proper tier 1 S tier tournament, at a time in the calendar where we normally wouldn't have one. And I think that was the main takeaway for me. There was 2 weeks of quality Counter-Strike that really set us up for what's going to be now a period in the season where obviously with Pro League, with Atlanta, with Blast coming up as well. There's going to be tournaments where there's going to be missing a lot of the top dogs, and there's going to be tournaments where a lot of them are at, Blast one of them, but not all of them. And I think that was a good time in the calendar to really set the scene for Vitality, to be like, okay, you're the clear number one right now. You are, quote unquote, unbeatable. And now let's see in a couple of months, you're going to skip out on a couple of tournaments, and the ones you're not skipping out on, you're most likely going to win. And who knows if you get a Grand Slam to your tally before you go into the major in Cologne, So I think in terms of building up for Cologne and building up for the major, that was pretty much the perfect tournament for Cluj, but also for Vitality to win in the fashion they did.
Yeah, I have to say it right now as well. Not only do I think most teams don't think they can win, but the only two I actually even think you can put on, like, pencil in maybe they can, are not in the best condition, because I actually do think the two teams that are obvious that have a chance should be Falcons and Furia, because they also had they were the ones doing it last season. But if you look at them, first of all, Furia just are not the same team in terms of, like, morale, confidence. Bro, some of that's been shaken, some of it's Molodoi, but some of it's just the team. Like, that team, this is why, unfortunately, people again think I was hating last season. This is why I had to be a naysayer of that second season last year, Pimp, because it was like, they win every bloody close game. Like, unless you are literally one of the best teams ever, you just don't do that. Like, that's why actually we have that term phase bullshit, because it's very rare someone has an actual, like, pattern that, like, I just win close big games. Like, normally those, you win a few in this tournament and you lose a few in the next tournament. It all evens out in the long run. So Furia would have to get their level up a little bit. And then the joke of the Falcons one is, I still think, Pimp, if you put them tomorrow in a match against each other, especially one without massive stakes, Falcons might even win it. Maybe they even be like a coin flip. Their problem obviously is they keep fucking losing everyone else. You never get to see them play the match. Like, I think it's one of those ones where, because their players, like, especially their stars, are afraid to play Vitality, they've been playing their whole career. In fact, they were obviously, when they were in G2, that was one of their main rivals. The problem is, though, if you're going to lose to every other fucking team, you're never going to be in a final and play them. Like, you're just going to be sat watching like the rest of us. Because, like, that's actually, if you want to segue this into Pro League, obviously a fun angle is this. There is perfect timing. No Vitality at this Pro League. This is the one they chose to skip. So here's my question for you, Pimp. If we were, like, running CS like it was WWE, and we're Vince McMahon and we decide the storylines, who would you want to win Pro League to set up, like, a big battle against Vitality next? Who would you want to kind of nick the one where Vitality isn't there to then do who would we have wrestle at WrestleMania in this analogy? Who do you want to win?
Spirit is at Pro League, right? I believe so. Yes. I would love for Spirit to come in and dominate Pro League. I would love for donk to come in and dominate. I would love for Spirit to give us a reason to believe that roster move just took a bit of a time before it worked out, that Magix as an in-game leader is going to learn tournament by tournament, and Spirit could potentially at least show, some potential that could be that, okay, this is interesting. Maybe if they went up against Vitality in a grand final or up against them in a semi-final in a best-of-3 game, then that could be interesting. So selflessly, I would say that, have Spirit go nuclear, have Donk go nuclear, so we can build up the Saivu versus Donk, the Spirit versus Vitality. Because even if Furia comes in and win Pro League, I believe they're there as well, right? Then
yes,
it's not going to change much, because as I said, I think Furia right now is the second best team in the world, by all means. And I think the gap between the best team in the world and the second best is large. So if the second best wins a tournament where the best is not there, then sure thing that could be interesting, and maybe that sets them up for another go at Vitality. But I don't really see that changing. I don't see that dynamic changing. I think Vitality's got to beat them more often than not. Falcons, if they were to win, I'm not gonna lie, bro. I've lost faith in that lineup.
Falcons isn't there. They're skipping it as well.
They're skipping as well. Well, there you go. So that makes it even easier. But even if they were there,
sure.
Yeah, it wouldn't change a goddamn thing, because I've lost faith in that Falcons lineup. I think them not changing in the off season was okay. I can see why, because they played well at Hong Kong. They played well at Chengdu. They went into the grand finals, couldn't get over the hurdle, but we still got there, consistently in the semifinals, consistently in the finals. We'll figure it out over the break.
Let me ask you an edgy question, Pimp. So, okay, this was a big topic on some of my shows this year, and I can tell you, one of the big differences is, whereas you can imagine on Hot Take Point, mate, people like Kassad always thought like Zonic should be on the hot seat, even last year, even when he had the old roster, mate, with Snappy and that. But the difference is, they've all won me over, mate. Like, I've had to break, because what I've realised is, if you think about how football and sports work, like, even I agree, mate. Like, put it this way, I'm a massive fan of Jose Mourinho. There's been teams where Jose Mourinho couldn't get to the players anymore. And I was like, yeah, it's time to move on, mate. Okay, time to go to your next team and figure out if that's someone for you. So, to me, I'm not even doing the thing of like Zonic's a fraud. But I do look at this team and I'm like, you know what? If you make the gambles he's made, and by the way, one gamble is to not make a roster move this last off-season. If you do that, in my opinion, if you don't get any trophies this season and you go to this major and you don't win the Siam Clone Major, I'm actually totally fine if they fire him, mate. I know the reason I'm bringing this up to you is I don't know where you're at on that one. Put it this way, do you think it would be unfair if this is the last season that Zonic has in Falcons?
No, not
obviously?
at all. Not at all. I think I would have questioned the decision if they fired him during the off-season. I think that would have been... I think that wouldn't have been fair, because they were getting closer. They were getting good, And even though people don't want to admit it, they were a top 3 team in the later stages of 25, So if you're that close to be the best, especially people forget, and that's the thing with short-term memory. People forget that Vitality just 3-4 months ago seemed beatable, So if you're the third best and the best team in the world is beatable, then you're not far off winning trophies. You're not far off getting to the point where you're the best team in the world. So I get why they kept him over the break. I agree, though. If he doesn't figure out Falcons, or if Falcons doesn't figure out themselves by Cologne, by the summer break, then yes, he has to go. And I also very much echo the sentiment that doesn't mean that I think Zonic is a fraud. That means that I don't think that lineup is going to work out with him as a coach. Whether that is on him, whether that is on Falcons, whether it's stylistically is not working out. And that's, again, I would love to have that conversation on a deeper level for people before they go crazy in the comments. But if you think history of Zonic, where he found all the success with all his teams, it was in Astralis, who relied on team play, who relied on synergy, who relied on being good in clutches, who relied not necessarily on superstars. It was in Vitality, I think, there's part of me who believes that Zonic laid the foundation for the Vitality that we see today. I think Apex learned a lot from playing with Zonic. I think that whole foundation is still the way they think about Counter-Strike, the way they build up the Vitality we know today. I don't think necessarily that would have happened without Zonic. It's like, as you said, with Jose Mourinho, when he was in Real Madrid, he didn't win the Champions League, but he broke the scoring record in La Liga. He won the trophy in there. And when he left Madrid, he didn't get fired. When he left, he also said that, listen, I laid the foundation, and then Zidane came in, and then they won everything. Pretty sure Mourinho could have done the same thing if he would have stayed. So I don't necessarily think that Zonic. How do I say this? Because it is his fault, in a sense, and he has to take responsibility. But I think if anything, I would label it to, having a team of superstars was never really in the DNA of Zonic. The way he wants to coach, the way he wants to run a team.
Yes.
So for Falcons to bank on him and sign him, if anyone, maybe that was a mismatch from the get-go. Maybe that was not the way they should have done it, or at the very least, not the way they should have built the team. And if it was Sonic's vision to, get all the superstars and get the Nikos and get the Monacies and get the Kyusuke, and he forced that upon Falcons, then sure, he has to take responsibility and I guess leave his job or get fired if it doesn't work out. But I think there's a two-way street there where obviously Falcons were never gonna build a team with, not the superstars. They were never going to go out and make quote-unquote budget signings or smart signings or bank on someone to develop over the year or two. They were going there for signing the superstars. So I don't think there was ever a conversation in that regard. But, to summarize it and bottom line, then yes, if they don't figure it out and if they can't solve it by either changing the roster right now, which I think should be something they should be looking into, or by turning around the ship and be at the very least, in a final for IM Cologne and winning a trophy somewhere, then yes, I agree. I think someone else, another coach who's maybe better suited for that team, should get the chance to see if they can unlock Falcons. Because if Sonic can't do it within the next 2 or 3 months, then he's never gonna be able to do it.
I've got an edgy follow-up for you. So listen to this premise I'll create and then see what you think of it. So when people do that thing where fans, like in the modern day, who are young fans or they just only joined the game recently, what they do is they never just say, by the way, I started in this year and, I just looked this thing up. They always talk as though they watched, like they were me, mate. They like beta one of the game and they saw everyone in here because they all have the biggest opinions ever without any disclaimers. And so one thing I want to ask is this. I actually think in history, I'm imagining the kid 10 years from now who goes on Wikipedia and he's looking up, let's just say he does it by, I don't know, prize money all the time. So he's looking up who's Nico, who's, Divide. He's looking at all the great players. I'll tell you one question that kid will have. And so I'm going to put a situation to you and see how you answer it, which is, even though right now we all look in Falcons and mainly we blame Zonic because it was his project. He came in theory, he had carte blanche to do what he wanted. Supposedly the names he's gotten, Nico, Monacy, these are the people he chose. He obviously chose also to kick some quite good players, quite competent people, Snappy, Megis. He's removed some pretty legit players. Joker's even removed Dexter after an MVP. He's in theory had all this power. Right, let me frame it differently. I'll give you a different angle. In history, that kid might not even look at Zonic first, mate. He might look, if he's just looking at all these different players, and he might go, wait a minute, was it Nico then? Because here's why, mate. Let me give you a scenario. What if I told you this is who Nico... Remember, at the moment in history, the kid will know Nico didn't win a major unless he does it in the future, and that will always be the mystery that just like we're all trying to figure it out now. Someone down the line's going to go, why didn't he ever win the major? Just like they do with great players that have won the Champions League or never won the fucking NBA championship or whatever. And so I'll give you a little scenario. If you're Nico, right, everyone can see if they look up the videos. He's obviously a fantastic player. He's got great stats. He's had an unbelievable run of being a HLTV top X player, like top 5 a million times, etc. He's been deep in all the tournaments. He's even won, now at this point in time, most of the big tournaments that aren't the majors. But if you think about the two angles where if you're Nico, you would want help, it would be coaches and IGLs. Listen to this list, Pimp. So his IGLs, he's had Carrigan and Alexi B. His coaches, are you ready? He's had X-Stars and Zonic. Mate, the kid in the future's going to go, is Nico part of the problem? Like, bro, at the end of the day, those are the players, mate. The other players dream of having as their coach in the IGL. You know what I mean? Like if I'm making a team today, mate, and you ask me to make a fantasy, I'm probably going to put some of those people in that roster. So is Nico himself, do you think, does the fact no one's figured out the Nico code, does that let Zonic off the hook a little bit? Is Nico part of the problem? What do you think?
I mean, it's hard to make the case that he's not, somewhat part of the problem, to some degree, especially when we talk the majors and maybe him not necessarily showing up all the time. But I can't help to think when you put that narrative out and when you say it like you do, I'm also thinking Nico in G2. I think he won trophies with a team that was not supposed to win trophies. I think he carried, a team like G2 to a lot of big games and a lot of trophies for that matter, a lot of grand finals that they were never supposed to be in. Because you can also look at who he has as an in-game leader in that period. You had Snacks, like he made Snacks, a legitimate in-game leader. And with all due respect, look at Snacks in Gamer League right now and look at where Snacks ended up. He's not a bad in-game leader, but he's not a top 5 material at all. So he was quote unquote stuck with that as well in his prime. So I think that's a way of spinning that narrative away again from Nico. But I mean, the whole major thing is as you said, like that's always going to go down in history. There's always going to be a talking point, and it's funny how that works. Had freaking Cloud9 not won that Boston Major, like we wouldn't have spent so much time talking about this bullshit, because
basically, if Stewie whiffed one bullet on that round where they rush him on Inferno, Nico doesn't have to do a single mouse click. He's just a major champion, and all of history. It feels like we're just not even having this convo, are we? We're just talking about something else instead.
Yeah, it would change everything, in that regard. And that's just funny how that works sometimes, and we can find those examples in pretty much any sport. I can come up with the first couple of ones in cycling, which I'm very much involved into right now. I'm sure with the NFL and the NBA, there's great players who's never achieved what they were supposed to achieve. And I think Nico is just one of those cases. They'll be in any game, they'll be in any sport, they'll be in any competitive era that's lasted as long as Counter-Strike. Now, is he going to win a major in the future? Would that change it? Maybe. But in all honesty, your question is he part of the problem? And the short answer is yes, he is, of course, part of the problem, but he's also part of the solution, And I think in that regard, I would more angle it towards, maybe it's time that he transitioned into an in-game leader. Maybe it's chance that he changes something drastically that can spin a new narrative, that can give us new hope, that Nico is transitioning into becoming something that he was always supposed to transition into. Let's be honest, if Apex can make the transition and become a GOAT in-game leader candidate with his skill set, and his, I guess, skill and abilities as a player, what's to say that Nico couldn't be in 5 years from now the greatest in-game leader the game has to offer, if he can just, remain at 70 or 80% of his individual level, but he clearly has that, micromanagement understanding. He clearly has the communicational skill. Again, people like to blame Nico and say that he's choking, he's the issue. Speak to his ex-teammates. Speak to his current teammates. You have never heard any of his current teammates or ex-teammates label him as the issue. Like, no one has ever come out and say, even 2 years after or 5 years after or 3 months after, no one has ever been out saying that, yeah, actually, I do think that Nico, he was calling too much, or he was micromanaging too much, or he was doing this and this and this and this, and that makes us lose the game. They all have enormous respect for what you do within the team, and I think that's at least the way I always calibrate, The truth will always come out. So if Nico was overstepping, or if he was not as good as a communicator or as good as a CT side caller as people make him to be, and as we tend to believe, then some of the players that he has played with throughout his career would come out and sort of like confirm that.
You think they'd at least hint at it, at least give us something.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And there's been nothing.
True.
There's been absolutely nothing. So in that regard, I have no doubt. So if anything, is Nico currently part of the problem? Sure, everyone is. I think every single player in Falcons is part of the problem. Maybe apart from Kiyosuke, it's hard to put any blame on that kid. He's doing a good job and even becoming better and better. But outside of that, I think everyone holds a responsibility within Falcons, especially Sonic in that regard as well. But if anyone could unlock something or change something drastically, then it would be having Nico transition into becoming an in-game leader. And I don't think Kixon is bad. I think Kixon is going to land somewhere fine. But do I think he has better potential or higher potential than Nico as an in-game leader? Not really. Now that you need something to change, now that you need something drastic to happen to change the course of it. If I'm Sonic, I would have those conversations with Nico and say, mate, are you willing to do it? Can we do it now? I know we spoke about it. Maybe you're doing it in 27, or we spoke about it after Cologne, but listen, mate, I need you right now. And then we sign whatever player you feel you need in your system, the way you want to call, so we can go in and we can own the rest of the season. Like I would love for that conversation to take place within Falcons. And I would love that to be the next story for Nico. But I also say it like this. He's still a great player. He's still a great individual, but we have seen prime Nico. We have seen peak Nico. We're never going to see the player that, at moments were contesting Simple and Saivu, and placed himself, as the third best player consistently in the world, that Nico is gone for. Can he be a top 20 player HLTV ranking? Sure. Is he going to be a top 10? I doubt it, and if that's no longer the potential of him as an individual, then transition into your in-game leading duty. You want to do it. You've been speaking about it publicly. Falcons need you to do it right now. So if anything, that's the bomb I would love to see being dropped here within the next, let's say, a couple of weeks. That'll be nice.
Obviously, in the case of Zonic, his problem is just, aside from that Dexter, he has fuck all trophies. It's one thing to, be in semis and finals, but obviously you do need to win a few to at least make people believe like it's possible to complete the tournament, get over the line, etc., etc. The joke is they've even beaten Vitality. They're one of the teams that beaten Vitality the most. They just never win the bloody tournament. There's one other angle I'll say, which will sound like I'm playing defense for Zonic, but I'm actually more making the case that here's one reason I hate that people hate on Falcons. It's totally fine fine if they want to do it like you should win with these players. I agree with that. My problem is this. One thing people do in the modern day that I think's really noob is they actually think, mate, that if you have a roster like this, like superstar players, that like they almost think, I'll give you the analogy, Pimp. You know how in the old Football Manager games, when they first invented the mode where you could like watch the whole game, they had one where you could just skip the game. You basically just clicked it. It just showed you what the result and who scored it. They act like all zonic has to do with these players is just press the button and then like see what the result is. Like there's no coaching. Like they act that once you have these players, you just chuck them in the server and it's like FPL. They just win because they got more firepower. But bro, I feel like that is such an old fucking take. I can tell you, even in games like League of Legends, mate, that doesn't work. Like the joke is, one of the problems I had as an analyst who's not a super nerd about like the draft of League of Legends or what, I'm more like, watching like players, how good a player is over his career or big, simple intangibles. One of the things that made that game way harder for me to predict is you used to in that game be able to just look at the strength of the players and go, oh, this team should win. In the modern day, I can tell you in League of Legends that doesn't do it. Like now it is things like how well does your team work together? This guy might not be as good as that guy, but does he play a better role in your team? It's concepts that we all have in CS2. So I feel like people really do underestimate that like just having good players doesn't mean you just get the championship, mate. Like I think that's one area people always are really like, I'll give you the obvious sports example. Bro, do I think Kylian Mbappe is really good? He is extremely good. He might be the best player in the world and has been for like 3 or 4 years. But put it this way, but logically, everyone who hated on the Enrique guy when he didn't win with Mbappe, well, he won without him. Like, what's that? Like, logically, that should be 10 times harder, right? But it just shows how, like, Blend is so different from, like, just raw play. And again, you're not just stacking stats in a computer. These are humans who've got to work. So I do think people also do underestimate that, like, this is why actually, I mean, fuck it, I don't know why I picked Falcons. You can say there's a vitality. People also think if you just have this vitality, that's why no one gives Xstars any credit. They just think that, like, again, when you have these players, they almost can't lose. Like, I think people are really underestimating how much, like, Team CS is still involved in any roster. I don't care how stacked it is, right?
Yeah, I agree, especially now. I think that changes. When you look back in history, I think the greatest example is obviously the one you referenced earlier with Liquid. Having 64 days of being the best team in the world. In all honesty, I think that's the worst team to ever be the best team in the world. I think that's the least intriguing team to have ever been the best team in the world. Because I agree with you, that was just 5 players hitting their best shape at the same time. Almost like randomly speaking as well, while everyone else took a dip in their form as well. And that's not to negate or downgrade what Liquid did, but that's not something that excites me when I look at the likes of Astralis, the likes of Vitality, the Navi of 21, the freaking Gambit as well, even Gambit, to some extent, the old version when they came and emerged together with Heroic. I think those teams were better, even though that they don't have the same sort of like pedigree of the same trophy cabinet or the Grand Slam to show for it. So in that essence, I think it's something that changes, from era to era, from year to year, but it's more evident now than ever, that most teams that are successful are the ones that build with chemistry, are the ones that build with synergy, are the ones that play together, work as a unit, and it gets a little bit boring, to talk about, the players need to be friends outside of the server as well. They need to have chemistry. They need to like each other. And everyone doesn't have to like each other, but there has to be a certain amount of respect and they need to be functional. Because at the end of the day, if you want to be a good team for a long time, you can't have players who think, that they're miserable in each other's company. It's as simple as that is, You could be good on the server, sure, and you can ignore the fact that you hate the guy you're sitting next to when you're playing a competitive game of Counter-Strike, but how are you going to practice 8 hours a day at a boot camp for 2 weeks heading into a tournament if you are miserable being next to those guys, from a social perspective? So there's so much, as you said, like it's a big box of opening, plenty of different conversations avenues in that regard. But at the end of the day, I think we right now find ourselves in an era where you build teams with the vision that they need to fit each other. The pieces need to fit each other. And that's what Falcons have been. I think that's why Falcons are getting a lot of hate as well. Like they're the one team who's actually trying to brute force their way to becoming the best team in the world. Like by signing all the stars, by signing all the great players, by doing what PSG did, by having Neymar, Mbappe and Messi, in the attack all at the same time, Kiyusuke, Nico, Monesi, fantastic attack. Why you're not winning? Well, it takes more than that to win, right? And I think imagine this, if you take current Falcons and put them in the 2018 Liquid era, they beat the shit out of Team Liquid.
Pretty good one,
yeah. Shit out of Team Liquid. They would have won all those games. They would have won all those trophies. But that's just not the era they're in right now. That's not how Counter-Strike is being played at the moment. And that's also a fun exercise, and we can never find out whether I'm right or wrong. But it is kind of fun to place not the best teams, but the contenders, the second best, the third best from one era into another era, and be like, okay, could they have been the best if they didn't compete against Vitality? I think there's a case to be said that a team like Falcons would have worked well in 2015 when it was envious running around and just doing brain dead shit, by being the best individual. So when Fnatic had a bit of an era where Olaf Meister went crazy, and they were also basically just pocking their way into becoming the best team in the world. Maybe a little bit harsh, but you get the point. That's not the era we're in right now. So you can also change the angle in terms of Falcons if you want to find. I mean, if you're the biggest Falcons hater out there, and I know there's a lot in the comments below. And again, I'm not glazing Falcons. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I'm over Falcons as it is right now. I want them to prove they're worth my attention for now. Otherwise, I don't care. But if you want an angle to like them, at least they're the one team trying to go against the tide. They're the one team trying to do it in a different way. And yes. To me, that's interesting. And that deserves, I wouldn't say it deserves respect, but it at least piques my curiosity. And that's why I've believed, that it would be fun for them to be a good team. It'd be fun to see them win, because then maybe they could change with the way that we think about the current era of Counter-Strike. But look at all the good teams right now. Furia, a lot of synergy, a lot of team play, a lot of communication, almost like the old SK gaming. Vitality goes without saying, the best team play in the world right now reminds you of Astralis, as we just discussed in some of those areas. Even Mouse, being that, second best, third best, fourth best, have the same thing going for them. They don't have the superstars per se. They just have a really good unit that works well together. So I wouldn't mind, and whether that's Falcons or someone else, a G2 that goes all in on signing some crazy skilled individuals. I like when a team is going up against what they believe is the era and the right way of playing Counter-Strike. And at the very least, that's the one thing Falcons have done. They've tried to win, the game on hard mode, and so far they've failed at doing so. Doesn't mean it won't work in 6 months from now, but it probably means that the gamble they made and the time we're in right now wasn't really the easiest time for them to make that brute force and become the best team in the world by having the attack of Neymar, Messi, and Mbappe. It just doesn't work in Counter-Strike 2025, Counter-Strike 2026 days.
I've got one last topic for you. So it goes like this. One of the reasons why I will always be interested in Falcons is, look, these are some of my favourite players to watch. Monacy, Nico, there's bangers to watch, aren't they? But also, it's what you said there. It's that I very quickly identified, even back in 2023 when there were all these rumours of the players they'd sign. It's like, wait a minute, if you just look at this track record, and I already knew from outside of CS about the Saudis and how much money they have and what they've done in other sports. It's exactly what you're saying. It's the fact of I always give this analogy. It's just Real Madrid. The beauty of Real Madrid is this. If you're in Real Madrid, just like actually my boy Xavi Alonso just found out, even if you're really good, you can still get fired, mate, because the expectations are almost impossible. The expectations are you have to be one of the best teams to ever play football and then win everything, basically. And even when you win, you have to win the way they want you to, where the stars are happy and things all work. So, but the good news about that, as much as that can be a downside if you are Xavi Alonso, the upside is if you're a Real Madrid fan, you must be the most entitled fan of all time, because you never have to do what a FaZe and an RV fan does now. Oh shit, is this just going to be another year where we're irrelevant? No, you know that at worst in 3 to 6 months, either Zonic's fired or Nico's changed to Agile or they had another big. Something is going to happen. So I'll give you another angle, right? Which is as exciting as that is. There's one other angle that I think is currently a sleeper point. It's been mentioned on a few shows, but I don't think fans have ever truly grasped it. And it is this, Imp, which is if you ask which one player obviously has the best chance to beat Vitality, it's Donk, right? Because he's the best player in the world, or he was not that long ago. And what I think a lot of fans really haven't stopped to think about is, bro, I genuinely think, unlike actually old Ziwu in Vitality in years gone past when it was French, or Simple in the Na'Vi squads before he took his break, I've told that story before that Ocelot genuinely went to those orgs and was like, I'm not even joking, for real, let's do this like a business meeting. What sort of number would it take to get that player? Can we at least even have a business discussion and see where it would go? And he essentially implied that even if they would do the meeting, you could tell they would never sell for any amount, and you'd have had to get some back then there was no Saudi money. You could have never gotten enough money basically to sign Prime Simple or that, and that's why actually famously he gambled on Monacy, even though at the time that was actually considered, now sounds quaint, but 600k was considered quite an expensive buyout back then. But he was gambling that I might get the next Simple, which he came pretty close. I'll give him credit. The joke is though, Pimp, if you look at how annoyed Donk looks every time they lose, bro, remember they're not losing in the group stage, mate. They're usually losing in the semis or going deep and having a chance. He looks so tilted every time they lose. I genuinely think it's not unreal to suggest if actually Spirit doesn't work out, maybe Donk would consider leaving, mate. Because I have to say, if I was advising Donk, look, you are in this golden era of Russian talent, but the one thing you don't have, mate, is IGLs. Like, and I'm sorry, no one can tell me go with James. He has to be the AWPer. That's such a weird. That will always make James teams better to be like an underdog and a dark horse, you know, because he has to be the AWPer and be the James style and the James call it. So I have to say, if I was advising Donk, I'd go, look, try this roster like one more time. But if it doesn't work, mate, you've got to get yourself to all those international rosters. Because if you could pick like the joke is an obvious one, even though they're going to think we're homers. Mate, I just try to imagine if Carrigan had Donk. Imagine already how good Carrigan's T-sides are. He would just torture teams, mate. It'd be unbelievable, wouldn't it? Like, how would you play certain maps against him? So, even though right now, I understand if you're Donk and you're Spirit, you're just focused on this squad, even if it doesn't work, maybe Chopper comes back. You've got to look long run. If they don't accomplish what Donk wants them to, he can just change Counter-Strike tomorrow if he ever chooses to leave. And if he ever does go to a team like Falcons, by the way, holy moly, would that be like, the internet will melt down, mate. That would be the biggest roster move of all time.
Yeah, I mean,
doesn't feel impossible. What do you think?
No, I don't think it is. You know, and people will always say that. You know, they can never imagine something, you know, that is far-fetched in that regard. And this is the same thing with Vitality. People can never imagine Vitality not winning every single tournament the next 6 years. But eventually it's going to stop. Eventually it's going to end, you know. And the same for Donk, you know. If he doesn't find success in Spirit, eventually he's going to get fed up with it. I don't know how much loyalty he has to Team Spirit. I don't know the relationships he has with the organization. I don't know what kind of personality, in all fairness, Donk is, you know, in terms of whether or not he values, you know, that Spirit was the first roster and Spirit Academy and Spirit. I don't know, you know. At the end of the day, I do think that imagine a world, you know. Now we're just playing the game right. Imagine a world where Nico does transition into becoming an in-game leader. Why don't you just, you know, go knock on Spirit's door or at least, you know, search the market or at least plant a seed, you know, within Team Spirit or within Donk, you know, where you let them aware, or you let it be known to Donk that if they don't find any success within the next 6 months, then you're always welcome over here. You know, we have Nico who's going to transition into an in-game leader. That's going to open up a bit of space on the server. And, you know, if it requires Kiyosuke to maybe alter into some different roles and you have to figure out how do you apply both Kiyosuke and Donk at the same time, then so go be it. You know, it's a fucking luxury problem if you can afford to have Nico transition into an in-game leader. I don't think it's completely unrealistic, you know. It's one of those that, what is it called? What everyone is sponsored, not sponsored, you know, hashtag at poly market, you know, right. What are the chances or whatever the fuck that is, you know, what are the odds that Donk will leave Team Spirit within the next 2 years? I'd probably say pretty good, you know. I'd assume that most people say no, hell no, that's never going to happen, you know. So there's going to be a 92 to 10% chance. I'll take my 10%, you know, that's going to happen eventually. If, as you said, if they never figure it out or he keeps being annoyed, and especially if there is another project out there that can see Donk and use Donk and sell it to him, you know, sell the idea that, listen, Donk, you are clearly, you know, a GOAT candidate. You're clearly maybe the best player in the world in 2 years' time from now. Who knows what's going to happen in that regard? You're clearly a once-in-a-lifetime generational talent, but look at your trophy cabinet. Look at what you won. You won a fair bit, but we think you could win so much more if you come over here. If you sell that prospect to a guy like Donk, if you sell that idea, nothing is impossible. At the end of the day, the only thing that hinders Donk from, as you said, change the landscape of Counter-Strike is a contract. And I have no clue whether that contract says 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, whatever it may say. And I don't know if there's a buyout, you know. At the end of the day, if there is, and if Donk has a willingness or desire to leave Team Spirit at some point because he loses faith in that project, or if Spirit want to cash in, let's say that Spirit or whoever owns Team Spirit is like, okay, listen, I can get $5 million for Donk right now, you know, in some absurd deal with Falcons. I may as well sell Donk for $5 million, shut down Team Spirit, and go to Ibiza for the rest of my life. You know, you have no clue. I have no clue. Nobody has no clue how that is run and how that is operated. But I will say to finish off that point and finish that off idea, and you could probably hear it in my voice right now, it gets me excited. I don't think it's impossible, and I would love to see it happen. Whether that is Donk to freaking Face Clan with Kerrigan, or whether that is Donk going to Falcons with Nico as an in-game leader, or somewhere else, you know, where the landscape has changed in a couple of years. Don't mind, don't care. I would love that to happen.
Because beyond like the logistical part of you have to like pay enough to Spirit or you're going to wait for the contract to run out. The reason why I think that's a totally valid move to even put out there is because, mate, I always tell people this. This is why low-key, I've made it quite clear. After the first few months of Donk playing and proving it wasn't a fluke or that kind of Itza shit, I actually am on the train, mate, that if he keeps playing like this, he just will be the GOAT of Counter-Strike. Like, I already feel like if I had to pick 1 year, I think last year's Donk is just the best player I've ever seen play CS. So, as a result, I think he has the most unique position I've ever seen, mate, which is this. when you did look at those old Vitality and Na'Vi rosters with Zebu and Simple, part of you thought things like, I mean, at the time this was a real take. Would Zebu even work outside a French team? We didn't know. Would he want to speak English? Would he be comfortable with other players? Remember, French teams were all about culture and the idea they all vibe and, that sort of shit. Simple, in his case, I mean, it's an obvious one. Every fan says it now. Maybe he'd be too toxic for some people, or he wouldn't get along with certain people. Yeah, a lot of people, I think that's why people think Blade's the GOAT too, because he was kind of the simple whisperer who could get him on side. The difference is, Donk's one of the only players I've ever seen, mate, where, first of all, his level of play, at least until this year, almost every tournament, it demands you win the tournament. Like, it actually, I always say this line, I don't think people realise how like, massive praise I'm giving. He's one of the only players I've seen where it's so rare I've ever seen him lose a tournament and went, that was a bit his fault. He's one of those players where the amount of times, like, I would be the worst friend ever, mate, because I'd be telling him, like, I don't think that was even your fault, mate. I think it was this guy, or what the fuck was the coach doing with that veto or something. I actually feel like he's the only player where any other squad, you're allowed to come into the semis or lose a final. If I'm Donk, like, I would genuinely be thinking, like I say, right now you don't, because you think I'm going to make this roster work. It's going to be okay. By Cologne will be in the right bit. We'll peak. We'll win the major. Then forget about all the rest of it, like they did with Shanghai. But if that doesn't happen, you have to have a really serious sit down and go, mate, if I can win every tournament now, but I don't, should I go somewhere else? I think it's a totally valid conversation. Or the other way around. I don't know what they would do, but if you're Spirit, then the pressure's on you to bring someone in. Again, I don't know how you do that without breaking and going international. Because as I say, I do think the key flaw with this premise is, if you're going to keep it so that everyone has to speak Russian, it does feel like you're always going to cap that IGL position. Like, you're always going to be playing somewhat more limited CS, unless someone emerges. Because so far, that seems like the one position they don't have in Russian Counter-Strike is the IGL. Hence why the bizarre thing is, I've got to give to him, yeah, Jim is the best right now. He's just the most idiosyncratic, weird IGL ever, but he is the best in their scene right now.